My name is Samuel Jack. Today is March 23rd. The time is 2:30. We are at the Pewaukee VFW. I am interviewing Bill Berrien, who was born on November 23rd, 1968 in New York City and served in the Bosnian War between 1991 and 1999. Bill was a lieutenant in the Navy and served as a SEAL platoon commander. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. All right, Bill, thank you for being here.
Sam, great
Glad
to be
be able to
here.
do this. So I just want to start here with your life before the service and just your life and what was going on before you entered the service.
Great. Well, first of all, just want to thank you for taking the initiative and the leadership to conduct this interview. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you.
All right.
So in answer to your question, I grew up born and raised in Manhattan in New York. I one of two children there. My father worked down on Wall Street, and when I was 18, up through high school, was always very active in academics, but also sports. Played soccer, swimming, and then tennis and lacrosse in high school. And I ended up getting accepted and attending Princeton University for college. I there played men's Division I water polo. Was a walk-on to the team and played 4 years of that, and then was one of the two captains my senior year.
Wow.
And was also at Princeton a president of my class, and I member of and later chaired the all-student honor code committee. So that was a fun path, and I'd always imagined and planned to sort of follow my father into finance, into Wall Street. And it was at the very beginning of senior year that I ended up catching up with a classmate who I found out was trying to go to officer candidate school and then into the SEALs.
Wow.
And that sounded like so much more fun. The next day, I ditched all of my banking interviews and went straight to the recruiter. So,
how did your family feel about that, deciding to instead of take your Princeton business education and go into the service?
Well, great question. My father had been Army ROTC at Lehigh and served in the reserves for 4 years there. So was knowledgeable about service. But I'll say it took my parents aback when I broke it to them. I remember it was over a good sushi dinner on 78th and 2nd when I told them I wasn't going to go to banking and instead going into the SEALs. But they were, for a couple of hours, hesitant, asking a lot of questions and all. But then they came around, and I say, actually, if it wasn't for my mother, I would have probably not gotten in, because I was applying in 1989. The Berlin Wall had come down. The SEALs were getting all the officers they needed from the Naval Academy and ROTC. And here I was trying to come in through OCS, Officer Candidate School, and there just weren't any slots. But my mother had been at a dinner party the summer prior, sat next to a Navy admiral, and encouraged me to reach out and make some connections. And those connections ultimately proved pivotal in getting one of the two slots to OCS that year.
So I want to sort of transition into getting into the service. So what is the process like of getting into the service, and how is that like?
So I actually have a son who's a junior at the Naval Academy right now. And whether it's the Naval Academy or ROTC, you go through either of those programs, you're getting a degree while you go through. So not only will you end up with a degree at the end, but then you'll get commissioned in the service. Officer Candidate School is this different model where it takes folks who already have the degree and they just need to give them military training. So it takes the military training in OCS is the same training that someone would receive over 4 years at the Naval Academy or ROTC, but because you're not getting a degree, they can compact that 4 years of different military classes into 4 months. And so you're in going through OCS over 4 months, and then you are commissioned at the end. I was commissioned as an ensign, and then went from there immediately to the SEAL training, basic underwater demolition
Yeah.
SEAL training BUDS out in Coronado.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's hear about BUDS and what was your specialized or basic training like?
Sure. Well, I mean, as they say, BUDS is basic underwater demolition
Mhm.
SEAL training. It doesn't feel that basic when you're going through it.
Right.
It feels like they're hitting you with a bunch of advanced stuff. Uh, but it's about a 8 month
Mhm.
journey through BUDS, and there's a phase before you start up where they're sort of getting everyone ready. But then once you class up or start
Yeah.
up,
Mhm.
it's 3 phases of training. There's a basic conditioning phase, they call it,
Mhm.
and it's within that phase that you have the famed Hell Week,
Yeah.
where a lot of people decide, being a SEAL is not for them,
Mhm.
and they quit. Usually, it's about 2 in the morning when
Mhm.
it's cold and wet out, and but there's that initial phase, the basic conditioning phase. Then there's a
Mhm.
dive phase, and then there is a land warfare phase.
Yeah.
And yeah, my class started with 121 and graduated 21.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
a little more than a 80% attrition
Mhm.
rate going through.
Yeah.
There were 5 officers, and the balance of the class,
Mhm.
or 16, were enlisted candidates, and then later SEALs. And it was great. I mean, great group. And it's the training is very tough,
Mhm.
and you're questioning yourself as you go through, especially
Mhm.
the early
Yeah.
stages. But you look back, and it was a great
Mhm.
experience, and
Mhm.
a lot of great friendships and relationships
Yeah.
coming out of it.
Yeah, that's great. Were there any, specific memories or friendships throughout that you were like, I remembered that and that was great or that was tough, anything like that throughout basic?
Um, you certainly have the going through Hell Week and all of that. A little bit of a haze there,
Mhm.
because it runs from you start Hell Week on a Sunday night, and you secure on a Friday or Saturday.
Mhm.
You are going the whole time, wet for most of it,
Yeah.
wet and cold. You have about 2 hours of sleep in the middle of the week,
Mhm.
Wednesday, and otherwise you're up and hallucinating,
Mhm.
and again, just always active.
Mhm.
And so it's tough to sort of pull little memories out of that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Even more of my memories, though, come from the dive phase. We were
Mhm.
actually the only class to, far as I know, to have their dive phase out on San Clemente Island.
Oh wow.
Uh, it's 60 or 70 miles off the coast of San Diego, and usually it's where only land warfare is held. But in my case, there was a big sewage spill coming out of Tijuana, so it
Mhm.
um, polluted the waters that we'd be diving in. So they had us pack up all our
Oh
stuff and
yeah.
have dive space out on the island. And there's a saying, on the island, no one can hear you scream. So
No.
adds to the lore there.
Yeah.
But great friendships. In fact, the class leader, a SEAL, Gabriel Gomez,
Mhm.
he was the class leader going through BUDS. We were then roommates when we got to
Mhm.
SEAL Team 4. Years later, I was in his wedding, he was in mine, and then uh, in the ultimate of coincidences, our sons turned out to be roommates at the Naval
Oh
Academy.
my.
Yeah, so not only the same year, but actually in a room together. And my
Wow.
son convinced his son to
Mhm.
row, and they're
Mhm.
they're actually both rowing now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
a lot
awesome.
of great friendships.
Yeah. So where do you go from buds and basic?
So at that point, the more advanced training starts. You get assigned to a SEAL team, and in my
Mhm.
case, back in the 90s, the SEAL teams were all divided by geography. Each covered
Mhm.
sort of a certain region,
Uh-huh.
and I had taken a lot of Spanish language in high school and then in college, and so I was inclined to go to focus on South America, and that was
Mhm.
SEAL Team 4. So I was able to get my first choice. Went to SEAL was assigned to SEAL Team 4. On the way there, went to jump school. So
Mhm.
that was a Army-run school where you learn to jump static line out of planes. So you're
Mhm.
connected by jump out of plane. You're connected by a static line. It opens your chute.
Mhm.
Different from free
Oh.
fall. Um, you end up you then get to the SEAL team where you have what was called SEAL Tactical Training, STT, and that's another 4 months of advanced training that you do as sort of a group of all the recently BUDS graduated SEALs, probably a class of about 40 across the East Coast. And you do, advanced demolition, weapons training, patrolling, diving, things like that. And once you're out of that training, you're awarded your SEAL Trident. This is a miniature version. They call it your Budweiser, and the Trident has on it an eagle, an anchor, and then a pistol to reflect the 3 domains of SEALs: sea, air, land. And so you're awarded the Trident, and then normally you go right into a platoon, a SEAL platoon. And for an officer, it would be as assistant officer in charge. I was the last to show up at my SEAL team, though, of this big group of officers. So I had about 14 months before getting into a SEAL platoon. And I ended up getting the opportunity to be on a Army Special Forces operational detachment, a Green Beret team down in Colombia for 3 months. Awesome experience. I was the only SEAL on that team, and technically the senior officer, but it was incredibly well run, and they run by warrant officers and master sergeants. And we were down in Colombia for 3 months, and during that time, these warrant officers and master sergeants convinced me that I should go to Army Ranger School. So when I got back, I raised my hand to volunteer to go to the U.S. Army's Ranger School course. It's their small unit leadership, premier small unit leadership course, which is about 11 or 12 weeks long. And where in BUDS, there's they use cold and lack of sleep as stressors for your decision making. Ranger School, it's food deprivation and lack of sleep. So everyone takes their rank off. You're rotating leadership positions. You're under the stress of only about 1,000 calories a day and not a lot of sleep and all that. And you're rotating leadership positions. So it's a really really good leadership course. Then I went from that to the SEAL Sniper course. That's about 14 weeks long. And after that, got back and started my first platoon.
Okay. So yeah, which one of these do you want to show? Which is a better picture?
Maybe we were doing chronological order. This one. So this was a picture when I was with that Army Special Forces A team down in Colombia. It was a jump team. So we were actually jumping with Colombian Special Forces unit that we were training with. So you'll see interspersed here, myself over on the right, and then other members of the team interspersed here, and then members of the Colombian Special Forces team. And great bonding there.
That's awesome.
And then the other, this was my second SEAL platoon. My first, we worked with most of the Special Forces across South America. And in the second one, we focused on Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela, working there, and Peru. And this was a 16-man platoon. Here I am as the assistant officer in charge. Officer in charge here, the platoon chief, Bob Ross, the platoon LPO. And it was a great leadership experience. Having that first one again, that was my second as the assistant officer in charge, and then I was later in one at SEAL Team 2 that was I was the officer in charge, and that was a winter warfare Bosnia focused platoon.
So in South America, what kind of things were you focused on with your platoon in that area?
So it was quite a bit of training with the South American Special Forces units. Focused on drug interdiction, special reconnaissance, small unit tactics. So we do quite a bit of training, and there are 5 mission areas for SEALs. The 3 primary ones you see most often are direct action, which is mean you're going onto a target to do something, a
Yeah.
raid, some active
Yeah.
engagement. Special reconnaissance, where you're observing um, activities, individuals, with a variety of technology. And then the other main area is called foreign internal defense, where you are working with that host nation's forces to try to bolster their defense capabilities, and sharing our knowledge and technology with them, and also learning from them, their expertise in those regions, whether it's working in the jungle, working on the rivers, the mountains, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And those missions were examples of that foreign internal defense mission.
Yeah. Were there any direct action missions or sort of missions that stood out to you?
When I later got over to Bosnia with my SEAL platoon there, we were involved in a bunch of efforts, both multinational and U.S. only, to try to capture various leaders from the Balkan nations that had been indicted for war crimes.
Yeah.
So in that early mid-90s period, there unfortunately were a lot of war crimes of these militaries taking action against illegal action against civilian forces, deaths, burning villages, everything like that. And so there was, these individuals were called PIFWICs, so person indicted for war crimes. And we were part of a multi-agency, multi-service group trying to track down these PIFWICs and then capture them and bring them to The Hague for trial. And that would be, those kind of missions were in that category of direct action, and then also that special reconnaissance.
Yeah, so I know you're getting into a little bit about Bosnia, but how did you get from being in your service in South America to eventually being over in Bosnia?
Well, especially through an officer's career, you typically spend 2 to 4 years at any one unit, and then you would go to another unit to get experience in that geography, that specialty, whatever it might be. So SEAL Team 4 was focused on that South America, and there was this leadership opportunity, the officer in charge position available at SEAL Team 2, and SEAL Team 2 had a winter warfare mission, and that mainly focused on being deployed and operating in Europe during the winter. So we did, as part of that platoon, we did 3 weeks of training in December up in northern Minnesota, and then 8 weeks of training up in Alaska, out in the mountainous backcountry, telemark skiing with big packs and weapons and all that, and avalanche training. And so that whole skill set was focused on being over in Europe during the winter.
Yeah. So what was it like getting to Bosnia? Did you guys fly or go on boat? What was that like?
We flew, and I was part of an advanced group that was going over to get things set up for the 2 platoons, mine and a sister platoon that would be coming over. So we actually ended up, there were 6 of us flying over early. We flew over commercial. The rest of the group would later be flying over military. But it was the timeline was sped up, and I know we surprised the German customs officials when we got off this commercial flight with cases and cases of military weapons and optics and all of that. So
yeah. So what were you doing exactly, like setting up for the other members to come in other platoons?
So when you are handing off or coming into a new mission area, you want to have some overlap with the unit that's leaving that mission or leaving that area, because they've been there for probably 6 months, and they've got a very textured and deep understanding of what's going on, down in Bosnia. What are the things to be concerned about, what not, and you want to have that. They call it sort of a pass down from that other unit. So spending time with them and understanding those lessons learned, so that you can be then sharing it with your force when they
Yeah.
arrive, in theater.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you were there, I know you got into it a little bit with the PIFWICs that were there and whatnot. But what was a normal day like in Bosnia?
While we were in Bosnia, I'd spend um, mornings typically over in, they call it the skiff, so secure compartmentalized intelligence facility, where a lot of the intel would be coming in, top secret and special category type intelligence. So you'd be, as a group, getting an understanding of that new intelligence. You'd also be doing your planning and your sort of daily awareness of what's going on, and preparation for your own missions as part of that group. Um, and there's always, while you're preparing for those missions, you're also trying to keep your own skills up. So as a platoon, and with our sister platoon, we might be going to the shooting range to do shooting. We might be doing demolition. Might be uh, doing, sort of general physical training to keep your readiness up.
Yeah. So beyond just your platoon and your sister platoon that were there, what was the overall involvement like with the U.S. troops?
So when we were in Bosnia, there was uh, the larger um, mission was called Stabilization Force, or S4. And if you go back to the Dayton Peace Accords that established the peace between all these warring Balkan factions, as part of that peace negotiation, uh, those different factions allowed there to be a multinational stabilization force that, so it was a lot of NATO forces, the US, NATO and beyond. So you also had, the Finns, the Norwegians, Swedish, Germans, Italians, French, and they would all be over. This sort of multinational force would be over there, scattered throughout the country, maintaining stability, maintaining peace. As well, there were special operations, typically two-person pairs, who were inserted into villages throughout Bosnia and Croatia. They were called Joint Commissioned Observers, and they would be at a very local level, getting an understanding of what's going on and trying to both communicate up and then provide insight as part of that stabilization.
So yeah, would you basically just explain through what happened to Yugoslavia and in Bosnia?
Yeah, so you had, starting very early 90s, you had a lot of, um, sort of balkanization, sort of, ethnic factions, uh, taking it out on each other, and where you had communities that were, mixed among the various ethnicities. You saw sort of ganging up and, destroying homes and driving out certain populations. So, and then you had, involvement from, neighboring countries, Serbia and others that, were, the Balkans was a war zone, and you saw some of that in Sarajevo. The bombed out buildings, certain thoroughfares. One was nicknamed Sniper Alley. So any civilians walking across that were often shot and killed, and targets for snipers on the various sides. So it was, the Dayton Peace Accords that put an end to that active warfare, but then it needed to be maintained.
Yeah. So within a new area of your service, Did you form any bonds with guys over there in Bosnia? Anybody you remember who was like, that was my guy, or those are some friendships that I made?
You did. I mean, you certainly among the U.S. Um, special operations forces, you're working so closely together that there are um, individuals in other commands, some known, some secret that I still maintain
Yeah.
touch with. In fact, just 4 or 5 months ago, a friend of mine, close peer in the SEAL teams, was promoted to his fourth star and took over Special Operations Command. And at his change of command, I saw individuals that I had worked very very closely with in Bosnia.
Mhm.
So, and then even beyond the U.S. forces, you have friends from Sweden, from Germany, from Denmark,
Right, right.
and I remember one of the great parts when we were stationed in Sarajevo was, given the multinational nature of the stabilization force, the cafeteria always had food from all across Europe. So it was a lot of fun that way.
Yeah. So, how did your service in Bosnia come to an end, or how did that go?
Well, your deployments are typically about 6 months long, and at the end of that 6 months, similar to when we came in, we had another two platoons fly in. They, an advanced group came early, met with us. We did that turnover with them, and then at the end of our 6 months, we flew back. Uh, and actually, our deployment ended up being extended for a month. So I had to postpone my wedding another 3 weeks. Just to, was not going to be able to get back in time for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But then you redeploy our two platoons back to the States, back to Virginia Beach,
Yeah.
and that's when you find out what your next assignment is.
Mhm. So, where did you go from there?
So while I was finishing up that Europe deployment, I received a call from the Office of the General who commanded the Joint Special Operations Command, which is the nation's counterterrorist force, asking if I would be willing and interested in being his aide de camp following my return from Europe. And
Yeah.
I said yes. And then, so when we got back, I reported down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where JSOC is headquartered, and was the aide to the commanding general of Joint Special Operations Command for about 18 months,
Yeah.
which is a completely fascinating tour. Because JSOC is the nation's counterterrorist force. So you'll have Delta and SEAL Team 6 and Air Force Special Operations units and Rangers all reporting within that command, doing continuous training in prep for a variety of missions, counterterrorism and other. In fact, it was that command that led most recently the capture of the president of Venezuela and his wife. That was a JSOC operation.
So, what exactly was your role in being a part of JSOC?
Yeah, great question. So as the aide de camp to general, it's a role that goes back to the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and thousands of years before that. I mean, your job is to help solve sort of individual, personal challenges of the generals commanding. So you're always traveling with that individual. You are, you know, understanding what the schedule is. You're interacting with others who are helping execute that schedule, and you're another sort of avenue of communication to get things done and to make sure the general is able to accomplish, in that case, his mission. And it's really a fascinating role because you're pulled into a high level of trust and confidence of, both mission concerns, as well as personal concerns.
So, yeah, after Where did you sort of go from JSOC? What was after that?
So I was in JSOC in 1998, 1999. And if you think back to that time, we had the dot-com boom going on and sort of a revolution in technology and business affairs. And, I had my initial commitment coming out of OCS was for 4 years of service. And at that point I was at about just passing 9 years or about approaching 9 years of service, and that was a time to just consider: do you stay in to service? At that point, you would probably stay in for about at least another 10 years till you get to 20, or hopefully beyond. Or do you look at opportunities outside of active military service? And I chose the latter, and I applied to use business school as a reset point after leaving active duty, and that's what ultimately led to I did attend business school as well as an international relations program, and then coming out of business school was looking for private sector companies that appreciated leadership a lot, and reached out to GE Healthcare, and that's what ended up pulling us to Milwaukee and Wisconsin. It's great.
Yeah.
Milwaukee area right here.
Yeah. From there, eventually you were able to acquire your own company, just working your way around, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I always had that ambition, following military service, to be able to buy, lead, and grow a company. But when you have that ambition, you want to both develop the skill set to hopefully be successful in it, and then figure out how to develop the capital or the resources to make that acquisition possible. So GE was my first step, and then I left GE to help run a couple of private equity-backed service companies in succession. So that combination there gave a great skill set, as well as I was granted equity ownership in both of those companies, and as they grew, and then I left. That equity had appreciated, and to a point where I could use that money to look at acquiring a company. So I, in 2010, left that second and final private equity-backed company and went on the hunt to acquire a company of my own. Looked at about 120 in the Milwaukee area, and found and acquired one, Pindell Global Precision, right here in New Berlin. Awesome. So our business is contract machining. So in this case, bigger manufacturers, take like SpaceX, Rockwell, others, they design big things with a lot of components, but they don't want to make all those components, so they contract out that work to companies like Pindell Global Precision that I acquired, that specialize in making those components, especially at volume. So I acquired it in its 65th year, and so that was almost 14 years ago. So coming up on our 80th anniversary.
All right, so now I want to kind of shift to reflecting on your service, and I'm kind of curious about what main things did being in the service teach you, or what lessons did you learn from that?
Oh, I mean, it was a the service in the military were a fantastic teacher, and I would say lesson number one was the insight and wisdom of individuals at all ranks, from the most junior to the most senior. And special operations was the community had a great culture, which was about, we need to identify the best idea, not necessarily where the best idea comes from. So it was a very, very collaborative, fairly flat organization, SEAL platoons and other special operations units, where you're really looking to each individual to understand the mission and the intent, and to contribute to the planning of the mission and the execution of the mission. So just most directly, I think it had a big impact on my leadership style, which is one of being very mission focused, and in doing so being very inclusive of different perspectives, wherever those perspectives come from, not just looking for the person who's most senior by rank or tenure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So great question.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up here, is there a message you would want to leave for young people, maybe those who are thinking about going into the service? Or
Well, I'd say that the biggest sort of message and wish I leave is sort of exactly that, to that young people. I wish they would consider military service uh, early in their lives or earlier in their careers. I think it's uh, there's a lot of growth and satisfaction that comes from devoting yourself for a given period of time to something greater and more important than yourself, a greater cause, a greater unit. There's a selflessness to that, and there's there's the opportunity for adventures of a lifetime, see the world,
Yeah.
have these great experiences, and then for some that can lead to a multi-decade career, but for others it can be a case of whatever they wanted to do before going into the service, they can do after they get out of the service. Yet they do it with all of these life experiences and insights and adventures that they're building on. So I just really like to, one of the challenges with society these days is there aren't as many role models of military service as there had been, if you think, in a couple of decades after World War II. And so young people don't get exposed as much to those who have served, and sometimes what they are exposed to might be jaded by movies or by the opinions of others who haven't served. And I would just love to encourage young people to look at that opportunity of military service. And look, if the military side of military service isn't exactly the right fit, I think it's great to be looking at service in general, whether just something bigger than oneself, whether it is Peace Corps, whether it's government, whether it's church, whether it's different different ways to again serve and be part of something bigger. I think it's a great way to start a life.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would want people to know about your service, or anything else we might have not touched on that you want to?
No, I think we covered some great ground. No, I think it's it's been a very enjoyable journey, and I'd be sad if I had made early decisions not to pursue that journey. And I think that again, along the lines of what we just talked about, taking those kind of risks in life is very valuable. And I would just also insert in there that sometimes you have to make those decisions against the wishes of your parents or others. Because they might not be inclined, they might not think that's the best use. But that's once you're 18, you're an adult, and you're there, and even before, you're embarking on that path of being your own person. And so as you consider different paths in life, what your parents have to say and their opinion is a factor in your decision, but it shouldn't be your whole decision. It shouldn't be the only factor in someone's decision. So sometimes you have to have the courage. In my case, my parents were very supportive. Initially hesitant for a few hours, but my father just passed away last year. As I spoke to him in his final weeks, I think my service brought him great satisfaction too. So so leave you with those thoughts.
All right, great. All right. In closing, this has been an interview of Bill Berrien regarding his service during the Bosnian War. My name is Samuel Jack. The time is 3:23. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Sam, thank you so much, and really appreciate the preparation you put into this, and your attention to doing a great job.
Yeah.
Speaks very highly of
You
you.
as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.